Hello everyone and welcome to the Problem Exploration webinar, Looks Can Be Deceiving, Using Data to Explore Agency Performance. I will now turn it over to Tori Russell to get started. Thank you.
My name is Tori Russell and I'm the Capacity Building Advisor for the Center for States. And as you can see on the screen, I've had over 20 years of experience working in the field of child welfare at the local, state, and national levels. My work has been concentrated in the areas of capacity building, continuous quality improvement, intervention development, design, and implementation, primarily using implementation science models, and in building evidence in child welfare. Today on this call, we also have Sherry Levesque, who is a CQI Program Area Manager for the Center for States. Sherry's an expert in program implementation and continuous quality improvement with over 27 years of experience in state child welfare practice and leadership. Finally, we have Kate McElroy-Helm, who's a data specialist with the Center for States, and Kate has had expertise in child welfare data systems and technology. She's done that work for more than 12 years, and she's been providing training and technical assistance to states over those 12 years to improve data collection and analysis. I want to take a few minutes to go over the agenda for today before we dig into the session. So today for our agenda, we're going to first review the objectives quickly. We're going to define problem exploration and talk about the key components of the data plan and data analysis methods. We're going to discuss how to avoid common missteps. We're going to conduct a facilitated breakout session or breakout sessions. And then we're going to close with question and answer session and provide you with more information about resources. Please note that we are going to be doing this work in the breakout sessions. We're going to end this session in our breakout sessions. Our objectives today are to identify the first 3 steps in the problem exploration process. We're also going to recognize and discuss the importance of data in identifying and exploring problems. We're going to discuss the key components of a data plan and why it's important. We're going to talk about common mistakes to avoid when identifying problems in child welfare. And we're going to connect with peers around the value of problem identification and data planning. So looks can be deceiving, using data to explore agency performance. We wanted to start off by digging into this topic by thinking about the following. So states and jurisdictions and others who are on the line today, we're all constantly seeking to improve outcomes for children, youth, and families. This is something that we all have in common. How often have all of us been in situations where we've tried to solve a problem without really understanding why it's a problem, without really digging deep into the underlying causes? How many of us today are also either currently experiencing within our child welfare systems or have experienced problems with children and youth achieving permanency on a timely basis, in a timely manner? This may be a problem that's common among states and jurisdictions, but what we have to learn is that there is not a one-size-fits-all approach that's going to solve this problem. Each state and jurisdiction who experiences this issue will have different cultures, climates, and contexts that influence the reasons that this is a problem. When we take time to explore the problem of permanency, we can learn a lot more about what the underlying causes of that problem are. For example, while one jurisdiction may discover that the underlying cause of their lack of timely permanency is related to underlying trauma, another may find that the problem goes back to ongoing delays with court processes, while a third may find out that the underlying cause is a cultural issue that results in biases in placement that make it difficult to achieve permanency in a timely manner. The key to understanding how 3 different reasons for the problem of untimely permanency are possible through exploring and understanding the problem through data. So let's take some time to look more in depth at what this process might look like. First, we're going to dig right into our polling questions, and you're going to see several different options on the screen. What we want to know is which of the following frameworks look most familiar to you. And what you'll notice up on the screen is that we have the Capacity Building Collaboratives Change Management Process. We have the CQI Training Academy CQI cycle, a framework to design, test, spread, and sustain effective child welfare practice. We have Getting to Outcomes. We have a guide for implementing improvement through the CFSP and CFSR. We have NERN's active implementation frameworks. We have PI approach, and we also have none. So take a minute to take a look at these and let us know which of the following frameworks are you're most familiar with. Excellent. This is great.
Results for the polling question are as follows. 54.6% were most familiar with the CQI Training Academy's CQI cycle framework. 43.7% were most familiar with the Guide for Implementing Improvement through CFSP and CFSR. 20.3% responded none. 18.1% responded Capacity Building Collaboratives Change Management Process. 17.1% responded Getting to Outcomes. 14% responded NIRN's Active Implementation Frameworks. 10.9% responded PI approach, and 9.38% responded Framework to Design, Test, Spread, and Sustain Effective Child Welfare Practice.
So it looks like from the polling results, the CQI Training Academy CQI cycle, folks are very familiar with that. And then the Guide for Implementing Improvement through the CFSP and the CFSR, folks are very familiar with that. Looks like we've got a little bit of a tie between the capacity buildings approach and the PI approach. Excellent. This is helpful. What's important for you to know, and one of the reasons that we wanted to put this up here in front of you today, is that the Capacity Building Center and the work that we've done on defining problem exploration is really built on all of these different frameworks and the best research that's available in the field. So the information we're going to present is going to be familiar to you. It's nothing new. But we're trying to present it in a way that really connects it to practice. And that's one of our real goals today, is to work with you to talk about problem exploration and work to connect it to practice. Child welfare agencies continually undertake efforts to implement new programs and practices to produce better outcomes for children, youth, and families. We all know this. We all do this. Effectively implementing new approaches and achieving sustainable change can be challenging. The Capacity Building Center for States has developed the Change in Implementation and Practice series. You actually have the first document in this series, Problem Exploration, in the resources pod up on the screen, so you can actually download this first brief here. But the Capacity Building Center has developed the Change in Implementation Practice series to support agencies in applying a structured approach to implementation and overcoming common challenges to developing, implementing, and then sustaining interventions in child welfare.
The slide is entitled Defining Problem Exploration. A graphic is comprised of 4 layers of circles. The outermost layer is entitled Readiness. The 2 inner circle layers are entitled Teaming and Effective Implementation. The circle layer immediately inside of the readiness layer is comprised of icons with labels that travel in a clockwise circle. Clockwise from the right, those labels are Problem Exploration, Theory of Change, Intervention Selection and Design/Adaptation, Implementation Planning and Capacity Building, Intervention Testing, Piloting, and Staging, and Monitoring, Evaluating, and Applying Findings.
The first brief in the series is aimed at problem exploration and offers step-by-step guidance to dig deeper to a better understanding of agency problems and the causes of those problems. To improve outcomes, child welfare agencies develop, implement, and adjust systems, programs, policies, and practices aimed at addressing identified problems. For these interventions to be effective, they must address the causes of the problem or need. By exploring problems through data, agencies can gain a better understanding of what their problems are and why they're occurring. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and hand this over to Sherry so we can dig in to a discussion about problem exploration.
Great, thanks, Tori.
The slide is entitled, The Value of Problem Exploration.
So across the board, all implementation science frameworks, that all the ones that Tori mentioned and any others, all highlight the importance of beginning that process with problem exploration, which is the process of identifying what needs to change, why it needs to change, and how we know that it needs to change. And so it's only natural to begin this process by thinking about an identified gap or an opportunity for improvement or an unmet need. And once that gap or need is identified, the process of problem exploration helps the team take steps to better understand the problem fully before developing a solution. Let's consider a brief non-child welfare related example of why this is so important. Let's imagine that you're having recurring headaches and you need to go to the doctor. The doctor could easily implement a solution right away, such as prescribing you pain medicine or scheduling a CT scan, but instead she asks you to collect some data by journaling your headaches for the next 2 weeks to understand more about them. So by journaling, you learn that the headaches only happen in the afternoon on weekdays and that the pain tends to be in the same place every day right behind your eyes. When you return to the doctor, she asks a few follow-up questions about your environment and learns that you work in an office at a computer all day with fluorescent lighting. And she also has access to research that helps her recognize that this problem is not uncommon. So with all of this data, you and your doctor are able to make a much more informed decision about what is causing the headaches and therefore able to identify the best possible solution to address them, which will be much more effective as a solution than the initial ones that the doctor might have implemented without looking more in-depth at the data.
Problem exploration ultimately increases agency capacity to identify possible solutions that address the causes of problems and promote positive outcomes.
So while child welfare certainly can be more complex than that example, without understanding the nature and underlying causes of problems, in a similar way, jurisdictions can risk implementing the wrong solutions, which can result in wasted time and valuable agency resources, but ultimately can make it difficult, if not impossible, to actually improve the outcomes that we're all looking to improve. So what are the essential steps to doing problem exploration?
Essential functions of problem exploration. The 6 steps are: 1. Identify the problem. 2. Create a data plan to explore the problem. 3. Collect and analyze data. 4. Identify possible contributing factors and possible root causes. 5. Explore and validate root causes. And 6. Isolate the root causes to address.
The center has described 6 essential steps in the brief that Tori mentioned a minute ago that's in the resource pod for you, and those 6 steps are listed here. We're going to be focusing on the first 3 of those steps during this discussion today. And with that, I will turn it over to Kate.
Think about a time when you needed to know more about a problem or issue. Think about what you did about that and how you knew when you had the answer or information that you needed. So if you couldn't find the answer or information you needed, what did you do about it then? You can feel free to share your thoughts or your responses in the chat box as we're going over the information in the slide. Effective change and implementation centers on the use of quality data to better understand complex situations and inform decision making. Data helps to demonstrate that there is a problem, understand the nature of the problem, explore the underlying root causes of the problem and the contributing factors, determine who is most affected by the problem, examine areas of strong practice, and inform an appropriate response. Without initially identifying a problem using data, teams can't begin to explore the scope, impact, and causes of that problem. Understanding complex problems helps teams make better decisions about the potential solutions that will help improve programs, services, and outcomes. So let's talk a little bit about a data plan.
Examining a variety of data sources helps agencies gain a better understanding of the problem. It can help to map out the questions to be answered, what data sources will be used, and what type of analyses to do with the data. As mentioned earlier, although many jurisdictions may have a problem with timely permanency, the underlying cause or causes of that problem may be very different across different agencies and most likely would require different solutions to address those issues. Data plans can help agencies outline and communicate how they will explore the problem and guide them towards identifying the root cause or causes of a problem. And they should be flexible and take into consideration what is feasible for an agency. They may also help to identify where an agency needs additional support or resources to better understand the problem. So let's consider an example. So you know you want to look at permanency trends for different age groups over time, but completing a data plan helps you identify which time periods and which age groups to include. It will also frame whether you look at children who, for example, entered care in a certain time period and then follow them through to permanency, or look at a group of children who exited in a certain time period and the types of permanency that they achieved. So the plan will help us consider what each of these approaches would tell you about the problem. So what are the key components of a data plan? There are 5 key components. Research questions help to better understand different pieces of the problem. An example might be asking whether this problem affects all case types or is more frequently seen in certain case types. Data and information sources help to identify the data needed to answer these questions. These should include a variety of quality data sources with both quantitative and qualitative data. Proposing the data analyses that will be done with the data collected helps to clarify what patterns, trends, and relationships agencies might look for to answer the research questions. Timelines help to define how long this process should take and what milestones to look for. The timeline could vary greatly depending on experience and the data that are available. Agencies may find that they need to spend time collecting additional data to adequately answer the research questions. And finally, defining roles and responsibilities helps to define who will lead and participate in data collection, data analysis, and oversight of data quality during the process. And I am going to now turn things back over to Sherry to talk about data sources.
Thanks, Kate. So let's talk for a few moments about the data sources that Kate just mentioned that are part of the data plan. Data helps agencies answer their questions about the problem and gain a better understanding of the story behind the problem. However, a single source of data rarely tells the whole story, so teams should examine multiple sources whenever possible. Teams will need both quantitative data, which is numerical data that is used to measure or count things typically, and qualitative data, which is narrative data that's used to explore and provide context. For example, quantitative data often provides a big picture view of a large number of cases that reflect the entire population the agency serves, while qualitative data may allow for more digging in within a smaller sample of cases or responses, which might not be applicable to the entire population but can offer valuable insights into the context of a problem. It's often helpful to start problem exploration by looking at that large-scale quantitative data first. In other words, things like AFCAR's data, NCAN's data, or an agency's MIS data, to explore key trends in what is happening. So this is the what part of the question. Following that, agencies often use a smaller set of qualitative data, for example, from case reviews or focus groups, to gain a deeper understanding of the why and how questions. Another way to view sources and types of data is considering whether the data is related to process or quality. So process refers to the steps someone follows when providing child welfare services, while quality reflects how well something is done. So for example, when examining caseworker visits, an agency will want to monitor the process. In other words, how frequently do caseworkers visit a child and family? And they'll also want to monitor the quality. In other words, did caseworkers actively engage family members in case planning during the visits? Process, quality, and outcomes are all interrelated. Another element that Kate mentioned that's part of the data plan are research questions. Asking the right questions is important because they help teams better understand different pieces of the problem and often include questions about the scope or variations in the problem by groups, services, geographic and regional areas. So for example, you might ask, does the problem differ across different populations? For example, children, parents, foster parents, do they experience the problem differently? Who's most at risk of experiencing the problem? For example, maybe individuals with certain needs, mothers or fathers, certain age groups of children. Does this problem affect all case types, or is it more frequent in certain case types, for example, foster care versus in-home cases? Research questions may also focus on a single point in time, for example, the most recent data that's available, or they might look for changes over time, like trends for the past 5 years, for instance. Having a data analyst or a strong data partner is key to being able to ask the right research questions. It's important to identify who those people or resources are for your agency and include them early on in your problem exploration work. So let's look at some example data. This is fictional example data, and think about how we would approach exploring this data more deeply, for instance. This example shows caseworker visit data in 4 regions of a state over a 3-month period. And the bars represent the percent of children seen monthly during that time.
The slide is entitled Asking the Right Research Questions. A sample bar graph is shown for caseworker visits with a child. It shows the percent of applicable children seen monthly from January through March 2016, data as of April 30th, 2016. There are 4 regions along the x-axis, with the percentages for each region on the y-axis. Region 1 is approximately 80%, Region 2 approximately 58%, Region 3 approximately 98%, and Region 4 approximately 75%.
What are your first questions about this data? What else might you want to know about it? And Kate, I'll invite you to share your thoughts as well.
Okay, great. Well, I'd be curious to know what type of cases this might include. If it includes all children in foster care, children in home care, or a combination of both. I'd be curious to know kind of the universe of who's included here. It looks like we've got some answers coming in.
Yeah, lots of folks are asking lots of good questions. Several people I've seen have asked what is happening in Region 3. Obviously they're having some good success there in terms of getting visits happening, and so folks are wanting to know how they're doing that. Another good question is this in-home or out-of-home care, or both together? Right. Right. What are some other differences in the regions in terms of numbers of caseworkers, types of cases that were sampled?
Right. There might be some geographic differences, urban versus rural. Leadership structure I see coming in.
Right. These are great questions. That question about leadership structure is a particularly important one, since that's such a key component of implementing any improvements. Right. Are there impacts about the numbers of children that are in cases? Like, does one region happen to have cases that have fewer children in it? Proximity of placements to the agency. Yeah, there are lots of variables that you could dig into more deeply here.
Yeah, some other workforce type questions, the experience level of the staff in each region. Data entry is always a good question.
Mm-hmm.
Are the differences more related to how it's being documented versus the actual practice?
Yeah, and that's a great example of that breakdown between quantitative and qualitative data, right? So, I mean, with quantitative data, you can really only count the numbers of visits, but you'd really have to gather some qualitative data to know whether visits were happening, but documentation was the issue. So that's a great example of the use of two different types of data. Great.
I see a question about trends too. This is a point in time piece of information, but how has it changed over time? Have there been significant changes that go beyond this kind of quarterly look at the data? A great question.
Yep. 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 And what's happening with supervisory support? Are there different supervision structures or focus on this in supervision in the various regions? So this is great. Thanks, folks, for all your participation with that. So another aspect of the data plan is how the data will be analyzed. And analyzing data about a problem or an unmet need helps an agency to better understand the scope and impact that the problem is having on the community. It also helps a team to determine whether there are nuances to the identified problem that may not have been apparent initially. So there are a few key aspects of analyzing data that can help teams dig deeper. The first of those is disaggregating data or breaking it down, which we've already touched on a little bit today, and the questions that folks were just asking about that sample data were some good examples of that. So disaggregating data is a way for teams to look at differences among the experiences of specific groups and understand different slices of the story. For example, instead of looking at data for all parents, what can the team learn by looking at data for mothers and fathers separately? Disaggregating data helps teams narrow in on critical issues or populations within the identified problem that might be overlooked otherwise. Also, examining characteristics of the groups most impacted will help a team see areas where they want to dig deeper, performing more analyses or adding different data sources to fully understand the problem. The goal is to get as specific as possible about the population affected by the problem. And lastly, as with all the steps in an implementation process, engaging a team of key stakeholders to help understand the data is critical to problem exploration, and using data displays can help this engagement by making data accessible to a broad team of folks. So using visualizations of data such as charts or graphs rather than just tables or narratives, for example, can help a team understand the characteristics and see variations in the data more easily. This can be especially effective for looking at demographic and service characteristics and trends over time. Of course, it's always important to consider feasibility up front and recognize any limitations in your agency's data analysis capacity. If the team needs additional support, you might want to consider partnering with data experts from inside or outside of the agency who can help you support the process of data collection and analysis. And we'll actually be digging deeper into some of these strategies in part 2 of our problem exploration series next week on June 12th. So let's take another look at a poll. And the first thing that we're interested in is learning about what are important things to consider when posing a research question to your data team, whether they're internal to your agency or whether you have some external supports with that. And folks can pick as many as they think are applicable. But what are some important things to include or to think about in your request when you're making it? And then the second question here is about your agency's partnerships with researchers that can help you make good choices around how to measure and analyze. We're curious about whether your agency has such partnerships and maybe a little bit about what what those look like. Who are those partnerships with? Private agencies, universities, and how active a part of your data team are those folks? It looks like certainly everyone, well, the vast majority of folks feel that all of these areas are important to consider when you're framing a research question up. I'm sorry, when you're making a data request. What is your specific research question, the time frames that you're interested in looking at, and the increments of time? Are you wanting to look back 5 years, 3 years? Are you wanting to look at it on an annual basis or quarterly basis? The specific population you're looking to explore in terms of folks in different types of cases, different age groups. Are you looking for single point in time data or a trend over time? And other variables such as geographic regions. Maybe it's all children who've received a particular type of service, all those kinds of things. And it looks like quite a few folks do have those type of research partnerships.
Yeah, it looks like a variety of partnerships, and sometimes within the same state, depending on the project. Might have different partners working on different things, including internal evaluation teams, special partnerships related to looking at child fatalities.
Yep. And some folks that have partners engaged in specific projects more typically, and then others who it sounds like are more of a regular part of their ongoing work. That's great. It's good to see that there's a lot of those connections that are happening.
Results of the poll are as follows. What are important things to consider when posing a research question to the data team? 5.08% responded, timeframes to look at, and increments of time. 5.08% responded, specific population you want to see. 5.08% responded, single point in time or trends over time. 3.39% responded, your research question. 3.39% responded, population variables such as age, geographic region, and services provided. And 96.6% responded, all of the above.
So Kate, I'll turn it over to you to talk with us about common missteps.
Okay, great. So let's take a look at some of the most common missteps that we might see in problem exploration. For example, not taking enough time to really dig deeply into the problem that's being considered. Closely related to that is jumping to solutions without a full understanding of what the problem is. Only looking at the problem through the agency's perspective and not considering other perspectives on what might be contributing. And then failing to explore strengths or exemplars of best practice and capitalize on those. So these are just a few of the most common missteps.
Yeah, Kate, it makes me think about that fictional data we had up a few minutes ago about caseworker visits and some of the questions that folks were asking about that, and it makes me think about, where might a state decide to try to intervene if they kind of stopped at that level of data and didn't dig deeper, as lots of folks on the call were suggesting. So, for example, suppose the agency decided to retrain all staff on the value of caseworker visits without looking any more deeply, but suppose the challenge is really more being driven by in-home cases. So that, that intervention would involve a lot of wasted time, maybe, and money, and may not really address the actual issue. I see we're getting a lot of responses in the chat here.
Let's see. Yeah, we are relying only on one type of data and one data extract, and not looking beyond that. Poor data quality being used to make decisions about what to do about certain problems. Collecting data and using data from external partners without fully understanding what that data represents, and is it really telling us what we want to know, and that's something that would require some conversations and gathering some additional information for sure.
Yeah, and there's a mention about top-down management limiting feedback loops from frontline staff, which really is another form of this misstep around only looking at the problem through the agency's lens. It's only looking at it through one lens, maybe, which is a leadership or administration lens. And the same is true potentially for external stakeholders as well. You know, missing that input it can lead you to the wrong conclusions.
Great.
Right. And absolutely needing to come up with solutions quickly, you know, because of pressure from external stakeholders and those perceptions is definitely a reality without a doubt, but it is also something that can lead to selecting the wrong intervention for the wrong problem. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and certainly the quality of data in terms of the data collection is always something that has to be assessed to determine whether it's going to be informative or not.
Definitely. Great. Well, thanks so much for all these great responses. And so with that, we'll move on to some strategies to avoid these common missteps. So engaging the right people in the process is so important. So, for example, engaging data and IT team members in these programmatic discussions from the very beginning. Also engaging parent and youth stakeholders and courts and providers. Using multiple data sources was mentioned in the previous chat, and we mentioned it in the example on in-home services, with the team using quantitative and qualitative data sources to really dig deeper for a full understanding of what was behind the issue. Ensuring that research questions include exploring variations in the whole population, including groups who have the problem and those who don't. If these trends aren't viewed with the full population, then you may make inaccurate assumptions about the group with the problem. Go ahead, Sherry.
No, I was just going to comment that there's a comment in the chat about also thinking about not understanding the nuances of the data and how it's captured, which makes me think about you know, the conversation earlier about having your data folks involved early and often in your discussions.
Definitely. So, and thinking about that last bullet about research questions and variations in the whole population, you know, if we consider an example around, for example, reentry, if you identify that reentry is a problem with children over a certain age and aren't looking at the full population, then you might miss that younger children are less likely to be reunified and make inaccurate assumptions about what the root cause is. So it's just really important to consider, to look beyond kind of what you might initially be focused on. So at this time, we're going to be moving into our facilitated breakout sessions.